Imagine walking into a dealership and driving out with a brand new electric car for roughly the price of a used pickup truck. Not $30,000, not $20,000, not even $15,000, but somewhere around $10,000. Now imagine that car doesn't come from Ford, doesn't come from General Motors, and definitely doesn't come from Tesla. It comes from China. For decades, Detroit operated on the belief that the future of cars meant bigger, faster, more luxurious, and more expensive. And for a long stretch, that strategy paid off. Americans bought larger SUVs, bigger trucks, more screens, more horsepower, more of everything. But something unexpected is unfolding on the other side of the world. Chinese automakers are asking a question many Western manufacturers stopped bothering with years ago. What does an ordinary person actually need? That deceptively simple question could end up reshaping the entire global auto industry. Because while Detroit keeps rolling out $70,000 trucks, China is building $10,000 cars, and millions of people are taking notice. There was a time when owning a new car wasn't a luxury, it was simply expected. For generations, buying a car symbolized freedom, a first job, a first date, a first road trip, a first taste of independence. Somewhere along the way, that shifted. Cars grew bigger, heavier, more complicated, and crucially, far more expensive. Today, the average new vehicle in America runs close to $50,000, more than many people paid for their first home a generation ago. And this isn't confined to luxury models. Even basic transportation has become costly, with what used to be a simple commuter car now loaded with massive touchscreens, dozens of sensors, advanced electronics, premium packages, and subscription services that plenty of drivers never wanted in the first place. Meanwhile, wages haven't kept up. Housing costs have ballooned, and healthcare expenses keep climbing, leaving millions of Americans feeling like a new car has slipped out of reach, a gap in the market that someone was always going to step into. Eventually. China noticed it first. While many manufacturers were busy chasing the next luxury SUV, Chinese automakers turned their attention to ordinary people, young families, students, retirees, workers commuting to their jobs, people who simply needed reliable transportation. Nothing more. That's where the story gets interesting. Most automakers think like engineers, focused on adding capability. Chinese manufacturers increasingly think like problem solvers, focused on removing cost. Rather than asking how to make a vehicle more powerful, they asked how to make it affordable. Smaller batteries, simpler interiors, lower weight, fewer unnecessary extras. The result? Cars priced dramatically lower than anything Western buyers are used to. Some Chinese EVs cost less than a family vacation, less than a fully loaded motorcycle, less than the options package on a luxury SUV, and people genuinely like them, not because they're luxurious or fast, but because they solve a real problem, moving people from one place to another efficiently and affordably. In many ways, these vehicles are reviving something the industry seemed to forget. And transportation doesn't need to be complicated. And think about an average day commuting to work, a grocery run, picking up kids, a few errands. Most Americans aren't crossing the country daily, yet many are driving vehicles weighing 4,000, 5,000, even 6,000 pounds. Move one person with a laptop and a coffee. It's a bit like using a freight train to deliver a pizza, technically functional, but hardly efficient. So that's the case Chinese automakers are making. Maybe the future doesn't need to be bigger. Maybe it just needs to be smarter. If one vehicle made the world sit up and pay attention, it wasn't a luxury sedan or a flashy concept car. It was a small, boxy little EV called the Wuling Mini. At first glance, it looked almost like a toy. Simple and minimalist enough that plenty of people laughed when they first saw it. Then the sales numbers arrived, hundreds of thousands of buyers, then more, climbing steadily. Industry executives worldwide started realizing something important. People weren't buying the Mini EV despite its simplicity. They were buying it because of it. For many drivers, it was simply enough range, enough space, enough performance, enough practicality. That idea carries real weight, because once consumers decide that enough is genuinely enough, the entire business model built around selling ever pricier vehicles starts to look shaky. That's exactly why Detroit is paying attention now, because this has stopped being just a story about China. It's a different philosophy entirely, one that says transportation should be affordable before it's luxurious, practical before it's flashy, accessible before it's impressive. For years, American automakers weren't really competing with Chinese cars because they didn't have to. Most Chinese brands weren't selling in the US, and many executives assumed American buyers simply wouldn't be interested, even if they tried. The confidence is starting to crack, because the real threat isn't just a cheap car, it's an entirely different way of thinking about value. Detroit built decades of business around larger vehicles with fatter margins minus trucks, full-size SUVs, premium trim packages, a strategy that works because every extra screen and upgraded package adds substantial profit. But what happens once consumers start asking the dangerous question, what if I don't actually need all of this? That's the scenario keeping executives up at night. Because once buyers start prioritizing affordability over prestige, the underlying economics shift. Picture two neighbors. One finances a $70,000 truck over 7 years. The other buys a $12,000 city EV outright. Both get to work, both run errands, both shuttle kids around, and suddenly the pricier choice has to justify itself against an uncomfortably cheap alternative. So that's why Detroit isn't laughing this off anymore. It's watching closely and quietly preparing, because history is full of warnings about what happens when an industry dismisses a disruptive competitor. Ask Kodak, ask Nokia, ask Blockbuster. The biggest companies rarely collapse from lacking resources. They collapse from underestimating change. There's a surprisingly simple piece of math behind all of this. Weight. For decades, cars have steadily gotten heavier. Many modern EVs weigh well over 4,500 pounds, some exceeding 6,000, approaching the heft of military vehicles from earlier generations. The problem is that every extra pound demands a bigger battery. A bigger battery demands more raw material, and more material means more money, which means a higher sticker price. Chinese manufacturers recognize something many rivals ignored. The cheapest battery is the one you didn't need to install. The cheapest material is the one you never used. The cheapest feature is the one you skipped entirely. It's a simple but powerful formula. Cut weight, shrink the battery, lower the cost, lower the price. The result isn't a luxury car, but it might be exactly what most people actually need. Picture carrying a backpack stuffed with bricks every day, then suddenly removing half of them. You move faster and tire less. Cars work the same way, and that logic is challenging assumptions the industry has held onto for years. Maybe EVs don't need enormous batteries. Maybe they don't need oversized touchscreens. Maybe they don't need to weigh as much as a rhinoceros. Maybe simple just works. And consumers worldwide are starting to agree. Part of why these vehicles are catching on is that they address a very modern frustration. People are tired of paying for capability they never use. Most Americans aren't towing boats, scaling mountains, or driving 500 miles without stopping. They're commuting, running errands, and repeating that cycle daily. Yet the industry often markets cars as though every buyer is gearing up for an Alaskan expedition. China's affordable EV push is grounded in reality instead. What does an average day actually look like? What does an average budget actually allow? What can an average family genuinely afford? Those questions sound basic, but they carry real force, because for millions of households, transportation isn't about status. It's about getting to work, getting kids to school, hauling groceries home, and keeping monthly costs under control. In an era where inflation has touched nearly everything, affordability has quietly become a competitive edge rather than a compromise, which is exactly why these vehicles are drawing attention well beyond China's borders, with Europe, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and increasingly the US all watching closely. The real story here isn't that China can build a $10,000 car, it's that China is challenging an assumption that's dominated the auto industry for decades, that newer must mean bigger, better must mean pricier, and progress must come with an escalating price tag. What if that's simply wrong? What if the next real automotive shift isn't a faster car, a smarter car, or even a self-driving one, but simply an affordable one? Something ordinary people can actually buy outright, because the biggest threat facing Detroit may not be advanced technology, artificial intelligence, or robotics at all. It may be a far simpler question millions of consumers are quietly starting to ask. Why am I paying this much for a car? And if Detroit can't offer a good answer, someone else eventually will. That shift might arrive slowly, or it might come faster than anyone expects. But one thing is becoming clear. The contest between America's expensive trucks and China's affordable cars was never really about automobiles at all. It's about who understands the customer of the future, and that contest has only just gotten started.